just waiting for that ad to finish out. I do appreciate everybody hanging out through those ads. They help support the channel. Welcome in for those of you who are new or mostly new. Again, my name is Meshla. I am primarily an audiobook streamer. I write and read Star Wars fanfiction. And tonight, I'm actually going to be reading. So. Yeah, I always like to give about 10 minutes after I start stream because an ad will usually run about halfway through that. So I try to give enough time for that ad to play and then get started on reading. I don't ask for subscriptions, but if anybody would like to support the channel in that way, I would greatly appreciate it. You can also subscribe via your Amazon Prime. You get a free one every month. Or you can subscribe to Twitch Prime, or Twitch Turbo, excuse me. I can't words today. Twitch Turbo, which removes all ads all across Twitch, actually. But the streamer will still get the revenue from the ads because they'll still play for everybody else. So just a little bit of info on that. Like I said, I don't ask people to subscribe. If you really like the content and appreciate it and want to support the channel in that way, I do appreciate those who are able to, but not required at all. Alright. And we are in for some chill vibes this evening. Well, music-wise anyway. I was just remembering what chapters I was editing on Sunday, so it could be a little bit less than chill as far as that goes. Also, I'm wearing an appropriate t-shirt for those who could see. My Yoda t-shirt. I've had that one for a while. Yeah, I usually run about a minute and a half so that they don't happen as often. I try to kind of find a balance in there somewhere because I know that they can be disruptive and annoying. And I also try to not read or not do any major story content, like if I'm gaming during the ads. Sometimes it's unavoidable, like if I'm in a flashpoint or something. But I do try to keep track of that. Alright. So yeah, here we are. So we are... I'm actually going to turn that down just a little. So we just finished chapters 9 and 10, I think, the last time I did a Storytime stream, which brings us to chapters 11 and 12 of Redemption, which is the second story in the Sith Duology series. So we're moving along rather a lot, well, about as fast as I thought we would. I've been reading 2 chapters every time, sometimes 3, depending on how long they are or how I'm feeling. But generally it's 2 chapters every time. Alright, so let me move my windows around here. If you see me looking off to my left, it's because I tend to have OBS, which is where my chat is, over on my second monitor. And please let me know if the audio levels are a bit funky. I'm constantly struggling with the music. Because I'm trying not to blast my own eardrums. Or anybody else's. So, yeah, that's a thing. Oh, that's totally fine. That is completely fine. All the fanfic vibes. Completely and totally okay. Alright. So, let me find out where I'm at over here. I'm a little discombobulated today. Also, please feel free to check out the channel point commands and the general commands for the stream. Some are usable by anybody. Some are, so if you're a follower, you can use them. Some of them are a VIP, some are subscriber only, and some are channel points. I don't remember which is which, but I'll have to update that at some point. But please feel free to use them if you think I need a stretch, if you think I need a snack, if you think I need to hydrate, which is about what I'm about to do. I do have commands for all of that. So please feel free to use them, but not abuse them. I'm supposed to also have sound alerts, but they have not been working, so I might have to revisit that at some point. Also, we have the chat cat, which is hanging out with us. There are some commands for that as well. And hello, Autumn. Welcome into the chat. I believe you have been here before. I recognize the name, so welcome back. And I'll be reading this evening, so please feel free to get comfy, get a drink of water, get a snack, and curl up for a listen. So, I'm just getting situated over here. Alright. So we are starting our evening's reading with Chapter 7 of Redemption. Yes, I thought I recognized the name, so welcome back. And please let me know if the music is too loud. I'm trying to balance it between my voice and not blowing my eardrums. So that's delicate balance. Alrighty. Turn it down just a little, I think. Yeah, okay. Alright. Redemption. Chapter 11. Wandering the corridors of New Hope in the moment they'd managed to steal for themselves, Zan and Callisto spoke quietly of things to come. The strike had come from nowhere so quickly that it caught the entire galaxy off guard. The threat was too significant to ignore, so they had both abandoned their quest to aid Mick and the Jedi forces. They walked hand in hand down the corridors, their Padawans watching their respective posts for the moment. Lost in each other as they were, it was with some surprise that they ran directly into Turlon as he rounded a corner just ahead. The young man rebounded off Zan's Beskar-plated chest to land on his backside on the deck. His datapad skidded into a wall and stopped there. "Easy, Turlon," Zan said, extending his hand to help the young man to his feet. "I know why I'm distracted, but what's got you in a hurry?" "You mean aside from the ever-impending doom?" Turlon gave the Mandalorian one of his grandfather's trademark smirks as he called his datapad back to his hands. It was a military spec version and hadn't suffered any damage. Yes, Zan waved him off. "I mean, besides that." "Well, I've been running inventory for Grandfather." Turlon nodded to his datapad. "And I thought I would check out the Firebird stores just in case. He's missing more than half his complement of shadow bombs." Callista whistled. "And you're in a hurry to go tell him?" "I've never seen someone so punctual for his own funeral," Zan chimed in. Turlon's eyes went wide with a sudden wave of fear. But I'm just the messenger," he protested. "I didn't take them." "Indeed." Zan crossed his arms and appraised the young knight with a mock seriousness. "Well, you'd better hurry then." "Thank you so much for that follow, Shadow Legion. I appreciate you. Welcome in. I'm just doing a little bit of reading this evening, so feel free to get comfy and grab a snack and have a listen." Indeed. Zan crossed his arms and appraised the young knight with mock seriousness. "Well, you'd better hurry then." "Yes," Callista nodded sagely. "Better bad news swiftly than no news when dealing with a raging rogue." "Raging rogue?" Turlon asked. "Oh, I did some digging," Zan said. "Back when your grandfather was leading a squadron of stump fighters, he had a reputation for being the one man you didn't want to have dressing you down. I think commanding this fleet is bringing back some of the old instincts for him," Callista nodded sagely. "Yesterday I saw a knight come out of the briefing room nearly in tears because he'd misplaced misplaced a crate of rations. Ah, Zane smiled, patting the now pale Turlon on the shoulder. But you're related. He's probably set the scorching to stun for you. But, but, Turlon stammered. I'm just the messenger. Whatever you say, kid. Zane waved over his shoulder as he and Callista continued on the hall, hiding their laughter. Flustered, Turlon took off at a quicker pace to find Micron, only to run into Stefan Card. This time, he kept his feet. Sorry, Master Card. Turlon sighed. It's all right, Turlon. I'm looking for Brink. Have you seen him? Turlon shuffled his feet as he tried to think about where he'd last seen the old smuggler. I think I saw him in the officer's lounge. Looks like he passed out drinking Ruby Bleals. Brink getting hammered on Ruby? That's not right, Stefan thought to himself. Thanks, he said as he broke stride and ran towards the officer's lounge. Turlon just shook his head and started running in the opposite direction. All right. Stefan found Brink still asleep, resting on one of the tables. He went to the smuggler's side and placed a hand on his forehead, pulsing the force through his mind to not only revive him, but also find out what had happened. Ooh, Brink finally started to say as he opened his eyes. Stefan, what the criff happened? Easy there, buddy, Stefan said as he started to help him sit up. What do you remember? I came in here and saw Einar drinking. He said something to himself. I can't remember anything about it, though. Einar, Stefan said softly as he helped him to his feet. Come on, Brink. I think you'll be all right, but let's get you to medical. Hearing voices at the end of the corridor, Callista turned to find Stefan helping Brink out of the officer's lounge. He looked a little shaken up, but that was all. Trading a look with Stefan, she asked quietly, Do you need help getting him to medical? Stefan shook his head. We'll be fine, but I could use your help once we get there. He paused and caught her gaze for a moment. He may have lasting damage from the wipe. It was forcible, after all, he sent to her through the force. Brink nodded quietly and smiled. I'll be fine. Don't you worry. Callista nodded and turned to Zan as Stefan led Brink towards the medical wing. Once she was sure they were out of earshot, she explained. Looks like it might be worse. Stefan wants me to find out if there was any lasting effects. I don't think he wanted to worry Brink. He nodded minutely. I thought I caught something pass between both of you. I'll meet you for dinner in the officer's mess after? She nodded, and then turned to follow Stefan towards medical. It doesn't feel like there are any further after effects, she said as she opened her eyes after she used the force to check the damage Einar had done. I'll say this. He knew what he was doing. Well, that's a lot of comfort to me, Brink said as he sat up carefully. Thanks, little lady. What do you remember? Stefan asked as he helped Brink sit up carefully. A lot more, thanks to her, Brink told Stefan as he pointed at Callista. Einar and I talked, and somehow in there we got on the subject of the shadow bombs that Mick keeps loaded into the Firebird's launchers. What the heck is that all about? Why he's using them? I don't know. But we have some more coming in. There may be some untold effects that may come around, Callista told them both before they left the medical bay. I've never seen a technique with this powerful of an effect. You're lucky I could undo it with MasterCard's help. So I'll come check in with you if I feel funny, Brink said as he tossed the young lady a wink before he tried to stand. The old smuggler immediately sat down. Shasa, I feel like I just spent a weekend with Mick on the errant venture. Like I said, Callista said as she helped him sit back down. I couldn't feel any further effects. You'll be dizzy for a little while yet, though. Ari returned from Ithor with her husband, feeling better that they were not fighting, but they had agreed to work things out after the war. They parted ways, and Mick headed back to the hangar to make some minor adjustments to the Firebird, while Ari headed down to medical after receiving word from Stefan that Brink had been hurt. She strode into the ward, a worried look crossing her face. Brink was sitting up on the gurney, rubbing his head. Stefan and Callista had been checking him out. You okay, brother? Ari asked in their native Koshakian. Einar mind-wiped me. Feels like the worst hangover I've ever had, Brink responded in kind. Where is Einar? Ari asked, looking from Brink to Stefan and switching to basic. Gone. Took off with the Sith fighter and half of your husband's complement of shadow bombs, Brink interjected before Stefan could answer. Ari's face drained of color. Mikron isn't going to like that one bit. She sighed. She trusted Einar's decisions, after all. She had trained him, and knew him better than anyone else, but she picked up the feelings from Stefan and Callista that Einar was now on their traitor list. Let's get you back to your quarters, and I'll go over Callista's work. It appears she has fixed you up nicely. Ari complimented the younger woman. Don't go after him, Stefan. I asked you to let him be once, and you went him against my wishes. As an old friend, I ask you to let Einar run his course. He knows what he's doing, Ari said as she let Brink lean on her shoulder and helped him walk out of the medical ward. They walked down the corridor in silence, and then she keyed the access panel and the door slid aside. She then helped Brink to his bunk, and he sank onto it sloppily. If I didn't know better, I would swear you'd been drinking, Ari commented on Brink's behavior. Though she knew he was quite sober, and he was only experiencing the effects of being mind-wiped by a Jedi. Ari sat down beside him on the bunk, and laid a hand on her friend's forehead, sending cooling waves of gentle energy into him. Oh, Shistraka, I'm not that bad off, Brink muttered. I know you aren't, Ari whispered, looking at her best friend. A tear slid down her cheek, and she removed her hand from Brink's forehead after a moment. He looked over at her, and his expression changed to one of concern. Ari, I'm okay. Honest. Just a headache. I'll live. It's not that, Miss Straka. We aren't going to win this war. We are so greatly outnumbered, it's not even a fighting chance. We'll lose, and a lot of Jedi will lose their lives, she commented quietly. And what would the head of the New Republic Galactic Defense do? Brink asked. She wouldn't fight a losing battle, Ari answered, wiping yet another tear from her cheek as Brink put his arm around her shoulders, trying to comfort her. And what would the Phoenix do? What would Ari Din, pilot, commander, Jedi Master, and hero of the Republic do? Her husband's voice came from the doorway. She and Brink looked up to see Mikron standing there. Ari looked across at the rogue and the fire behind his eyes, and something stirred within her. It was a familiar feeling and a welcome one. Her tears faded slowly, and her heart soared. She wouldn't care what the odds were, because she doesn't know how to lose. That's my girl, Mick beamed. Nal Hutta. Einar pulled the lever, and the fighter dropped out of hyperspace in orbit over Nal Hutta. I swore I would never revisit this place. He set course for a private starport in the eastern hemisphere and slowly landed the fighter once he was through. Opening the cockpit and climbing out, he heard a series of blasters being charged. Come out, slowly, with your hands up, a voice said from the darkness surrounding the landing platform. Don't worry. I come in peace. I'm here to see your boss, Habant, Einar replied, walking towards the voice with his hands in the air. I wasn't aware his lordship had a meeting today, the voice responded. Emerging from the shadows, a small Rodian stood there, pointing a blaster at Einar. Just call your boss and tell him Einar is here and he wants his debt repaid. The Rodian obviously recognized the name and backed away. Einar? Last I heard, that Jedi was dead. Einar grinned. No, not dead. I just took a vacation. With a snap of his wrist, every blaster in the vicinity flew past their heads and landed in a heap. The Rodian was startled and heard gasps from the guards surrounding him. I don't want to hurt anyone, and I don't want any trouble. Just take me to him. Aha, my old friend. Welcome. Einar grinned as the fat, slimy Hutt welcomed him with open, stubby arms. Drop the act, Habant. You know why I'm here, Einar said, taking a seat in the office. Ah, yes, that little debt I owe you for saving my life all those years ago. Einar had thwarted an assassination attempt on Habant's life when he was stationed on the planet some years ago. Yes, and I'm in no mood for games. I know I can't make you tell me. The Hutt laughed deeply. Too bad, Jedi. Einar slammed his fist on the table, shutting the slimy worm up. I need a clearance code to infiltrate the Sith Armada gathering at Mist, and I know you have your hands in almost everything. The Hutt looked at him appraisingly for a moment before he nodded. Ah, yes, that unfortunate fleet. I think that code cost you more than saving my life, though. Einar sprang to his feet and made a fist. The Hutt suddenly started clawing at his neck, trying to break free of the force grip Einar had on him, gasping for air. What about I let you live this time? Is that enough? The Hutt nodded and choked as he tried to gather air. After a moment, Einar let go, and the worm took deep breaths, recovering from the chokehold. All right, I'll give it to you. Take it easy. Einar smiled at the comment and leaned back in his chair while the Hutt searched for the correct file in the computer. After a few minutes, the Hutt handed him a data card. Here's everything you need. Now go, and don't come back. Next time, I'll order my men to shoot you out of the sky. Einar smiled at him and bowed. Always a pleasure doing business with you. Ithor. Master card, one of the Jedi called as he walked down the corridor. The other Jedi handed him the datapad from his station on the bridge. Oh, very good. Thank you, Stefan said as he read it, and then handed it back to the younger knight and smiled. Thank you again. He turned and walked towards the hangar, tapping his wristcom to get Mick's frequency. Mick, Dylan's back with the extra beryllium. He's bringing it over to the repulse right now. All right, Stefan, he heard on the other end. I'm still wrapping things up here, but could you go ahead and start directing where to put it where to have it placed for the most good? I'm already heading for the hangar so I can take Blue Talon over, Stefan told him. I'll see to it. Okay. Give me 1 second. I lost my spot. The night before the storm. This is how a fleet should be run, Mick thought as he finally kicked his feet up. Everything was running smoothly, and he had officers like Stefan who could think for themselves to thank for it. It was almost like being back in his squadron, but on a much larger scale. Instead of wingmen reading his thoughts, officers did what he wanted them to do before he even asked. The fleet was to run its last practice melee in the morning, and then they'd head out. Even though he knew they'd be losing this war, Mick Rondin felt indescribably calm. But maybe. Thoughts like that weren't becoming of someone who was supposed to be leading this little operation. Ari walked into the darkened office and laid her hands on Mick's shoulders as he leaned back. He smiled up at her. Listen, babe, he said as he pulled her around to sit in his lap. I love you. I want you to know that. No matter what, I love you. I know we haven't been seeing eye to eye a lot lately, and I won't make any excuses. People disagree, and that's just life. We need to talk about some things, and I mean really sit down and talk about them. But they'll keep for now. We have one last night before our lives are thrown into chaos and war once more. Yes, we'll probably lose, but I promise that as long as you live, I will too. He kissed her deeply. When things get hot, I want you to take the Firebird and fly out of there as fast as you can. Get to Coruscant where it's safe, and I will come after you. I know you worry about losing me again, but know this. Wherever you go, I will follow. I love you more than you could ever know, and nothing could ever keep me away. Mist. The fleet is ready, my lord, the comm officer reported. Good, the master replied, rubbing his hands together. They will arrive in 24 standard hours, and we will be waiting. Aye, my lord. This shall be a grand war, soldier, the master said, and there was the snap hiss of a lightsaber activating. The silver light from the blade cast eerie shadows on the master's face. This shall be a grand war indeed. Hyperspace. Einar checked the navicomputer again. He still had 2 hours to go before he exited around Mist. He poured himself some instant coffee and watched the star lines pass by the viewport. He didn't want to do this, but there was no other way. The Jedi would be slaughtered if he didn't do anything to even try evening the odds. He reached into the Force to a place where no matter existed, only energy. He drew courage from the Force and surrounded himself with it, feeling a tingling sensation as the pure essence of the Force flowed around him. This might be his final mission, and he knew it. He opened his eyes and found his coffee cup long cold. The navicomputer showed that he was now only 1 hour away from Mist. He was on time. There was still a little over a day until the battle itself. He would show the Sith that the Fallen One was back. Beep, beep, beep. Einar opened his eyes and reached for the hyperdrive controls. He would drop out of hyperspace in 5 minutes and needed to prepare himself. It wasn't enough to have the access codes. These Sith would spot a Jedi in the Force immediately. He closed his eyes again and returned to the time and place where it had all begun. Renvar. Einar laughed. He couldn't stop laughing. Oh, I'm going to stop there because we're in an ad. And I'm going to take a water break. Alright. And we're back. I'm actually glad I really caught that ad break because sometimes I don't. And then I'm reading during the ad break and I feel bad when I do that. Alright. Einar laughed. He couldn't stop laughing. You can't stop me, Mick. No one can. Wanna bet? Mick ran towards Einar, igniting his blade. Einar ignited the Sith blade he'd taken off a dead body before he struck at Mick. Mick blocked the strike and punched Einar in the face. Einar responded by summoning the Force and pushing Mick away. Let me be, Mick. I don't want to kill you. Maybe hurt you. With a sudden movement, Einar was back, swinging his blade, but Mick was not as lucky this time. Einar struck his arm. Mick backed away, holding his arm for a moment. Einar could feel the anger in Mick rising like a tidal wave. Mick nursed his arm and then swung at Einar. Einar could feel him falling deeply into the Force, moving with extraordinary speed. Einar blocked one move after another, but Mick was faster, and Einar screamed in pain as Mick's blade burned his cheek. He fell back, regaining his posture. The anger was swelling in him now. Raising his hand, he pinned Mick to a tree with the Force, holding him there for a moment and then raising his blade. You cannot change what happened, Einar, Stefan told him, keeping up with every assault. I cannot, nor can anyone else. You have to accept what has happened and move on. I am. You are letting your emotions turn you into a pawn, letting yourself slip further away. not accepting matters as a Jedi should, Stefan said as he stopped backing up. If what you're hoping for is death by my hands, then I will not give you that satisfaction. And then Mick saw the unthinkable. Stefan shut down his lightsaber and dropped his hands to his sides. I will not fight you any longer, Stefan said quietly. For it's a decision I make. Damn you, Stefan, Einar yelled as he dashed forward. No! Mick yelled as he sent a powerful burst of force to knock Einar back, but it was too late. By the time that Mick's force hammer had sent Einar back against the wall, his blade had already struck. Stefan's eyes betrayed nothing but amazement and surprise as the blade had struck into his left shoulder. Not deeply, but enough. The blow cut through ribs, and he could feel his lung on that side tearing and collapsing. He fell to his knees on the rooftop, his lightsaber falling from his hands onto the Duracrete. Seconds seemed to pass like hours as his senses slowed before he fell onto his back. But he could hear Einar's cries as he ran from where Mick had slammed him against the wall and then towards his ship. The last thing he heard were Mick's curses as the Valiant powered up its engines and took off. Ari felt a burst of anger and pure anguish just as she turned Archangel's head towards Blue Talon. Blue Talon started drifting, showing no signs of movement whatsoever, and Ari could only imagine what was happening with Andrea in the cockpit. My God, Einar, what have you done? Einar's eyes snapped open. He was crying. He felt cold and angry. This had to be done. He flexed his fingers and grinned. It had been a while since he'd felt this powerful. He stretched his hand out after a moment, and in it a blue bolt of lightning formed. Stop! The bolt faded away. He couldn't afford to fall again, and he was treading a thin line as it was. The anger at his late wife's murder was surging beneath the surface, and without it, this mission would not succeed. This was why he didn't tell anyone of his plans. They would have tried to stop him. He might not come back from this. He might live, but not come back from what the dark side... Oh, hang on. He might live, but he wouldn't come back from the dark side that was trying to get a hold of him again. The computer beeped, and Einar pulled the lever. The Sith fighter dropped out of hyperspace, and before him was the largest fleet of ships he had ever seen. He'd fought in a lot of wars, but this... It sent a chill down his spine. He couldn't afford to think like that now. He needed to radiate anger and aggression. He needed to complete his mission. He set course for the Lusankya, the closest superstar destroyer. This better work. He carefully guided the ship towards the superstar destroyer's aft landing bay, nice and slow. Fighter NS-320, transmit clearance code for docking, a voice said over the comm unit. Einar inserted the data card he acquired on Nahata and transmitted the code. That slimy worm had better not betray me. Seconds passed, and Einar's hands began to sweat. But, in spite of that, he focused on keeping his grip on the anger and still boiling inside of him. He dared not close his eyes for fear of seeing his wife. She must be disappointed in me. Fighter NS-320, you are cleared for docking. Einar let out the breath he'd been holding and maneuvered the fighter carefully into the aft landing bay. According to the blueprints, the main reactor was right behind that bulkhead, Einar thought to himself as he guided the fighter into the bay. The bulkhead was 10 meters in front of him, and it was... The bulkhead in front of him was 10 meters of reinforced steel. What he was about to do would require all the control he had mastered in the Force, and then some. He paused, his craft hovering in the middle of the bay. He didn't see anyone around. After a moment, he switched on his weapon systems. The landing bay's alarms instantly went off, and klaxons sounded all over the ship. He raised shields and prepared the bombs. Without thinking about it, Einar squeezed the trigger and bolts of blaster fire erupted from the fighter, clawing away at the wall before him, making it turn red with heat. He kept firing, digging deeper into the bulkhead. Then he sent the first shadow bomb. The fighter wobbled in the air as the explosion partially collapsed the bulkhead before him, but he needed a clear shot, so he vaporized the remaining rubble with blaster fire. He saw platoons of Sith racing into the bay, all shooting blaster fire at him, but the fighter's shield would hold, for now. When the hole in the bulkhead was clear, he prepared the rest of the bombs for launch. The fact that he might not live through this had started to creep into his thoughts. He bit his lip and armed the remaining missiles with a 10-second delay. Ari, I might not make it. Please, my master, my dear Ari, tell Turlon I'm proud of him, and tell Stefan thanks. Einar looked at the bulkhead before him and pulled the trigger. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered. Honor the charge they made. Honor the Light Brigade, the noble 600. Ari sat up in bed, a cold sweat beating across her forehead. Einar, no! She screamed. Mikron was still awake, watching her for a moment, and he quickly pulled her into a hug. Force, what have you done? Ari's mind screamed as she cried in her husband's arms. It has begun, Mikron said. Stefan! I felt it, Stefan said as he was warming up Blue Talon systems. He kept the cockpit hatch opened as he looked and saw Mick running down the hangar gangway towards the mobile suit. What do you think? Mick asked as Stefan started to strap himself in. If I launch and take Repulse with me now, I can arrive on the other side of the system as we planned. We're assuming 5 hours getting Blue Talon and the bomber to their fleet while we're both cloaked. So, we could launch the attack that much earlier, Mick said as Stefan started powering up his engines. 8 hours should give us enough time to prep the rest of our surprises. I'll position between the super Star Destroyers that are left, Stefan told him, and wait to detonate until you get the fleet in range. That are left? Mick asked. Natural assumption, Stefan said as he finished off his pre-flight checks. You come up to a pack of wolfhounds. Which one do you take out first? The Alpha, Mick reflexively answered. Or the larger of them. You think Einar went to target one of the SSDs? It's not impossible for one fighter to disable a Super Star Destroyer. You have to know where to punch. All right, Mick said as he backed off from the mobile suit. You've got 5 hours before we jump into the system. And you'll be sitting among their fleet for a good while before the two come into range of each other. That's a lot of time to keep hidden from their senses while you're cloaked. I knew the risks when we discussed it, Stefan said. Blue Talon's the only ship in the fleet that can handle the pounding if I'm discovered. May the Force be with you. And with you, Mick said as Stefan closed Blue Talon's cockpit hatch and walked the mobile suit towards the MagCon field. Spast, I hope you're able to pull this off. Mist. The master laughed as the burning hulk of the Lusankya began to drift out of formation. Do you see this? He cried on the bridge of the Executor. This is how the Jedi would fight us. They sneak, trick, and break their own code of honor by striking before the arranged time. Such acts will bring them nothing, and we shall show them how true warriors fight when their fleet arrives. Laughter from the crew pitch joined his own as he waved his silver blade in the lazy infinity arc before closing it down. The fighter that had caused the damage to the Lusankya was burning through the atmosphere of the planet below. The ship itself was shredded, and the pilot's only hope was to survive a crash on that dreadful planet of fog. I pray you survive, Jedi fool, the master thought to himself. I pray you live to see how little you've helped your friends. Sir, the comm officer called, what shall we do with the wreckage? Let it drift where it is, the master replied. It was nothing but a shell meant to scare our enemies. Now it will give them a false sense of hope. That Jedi saboteur had a 1 in 3 chance of picking out an occupied Super Star Destroyer. Obviously, he's not a Corellian. The master hung his cloak over the back of the command chair, revealing an old, tattered black flight suit. He strolled down the command walkway for the doors that would take him off the bridge. "Have our techs ready, my fighter," he commanded. "Our cry, you have command of the executor. Put the fleet in battle-ready position. I shall be commanding from my fighter. Think on your feet, my army, and we shall win this one yet." And that is the end of chapter 11. For those of you who are new to the stream, again, welcome. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm going to take a minute and get a drink of water here, because I've been reading a lot. Alright. You have to pause and stretch and get water. Alright. Okay. So please feel free to ask questions while we're in a little bit of a break. For those who might be new to the channel, my name is Meshla. I am primarily an audiobook streamer. I write and read Star Wars fanfiction, and have been doing so. Well, I've been writing Star Wars fanfiction for the last 24 years. Originally started out with a group of friends in high school, but now it's just me as far as the writing goes. So I've kind of turned my focus to more of my own characters in some of the more recent stories. So just keep in mind that the ones that I'm reading right now, the grammar might be a little clunky because they were written, 15 years ago. So, yeah, high school grammar is a thing. So it might be a little clunky in spite of my editing attempts. But, alright. Alright. Chapter 12. Ithor. "Get the pilots to their fighters," Mick ordered over the comm as he prepped the Firebird for launch. "Assume battle-ready status and wait for my order to enter hyperspace. Maintain formation. We'll jump in and drive straight for their heart." The Firebird sat in the hangar of New Hope, waiting to launch as soon as the fleet arrived at Mist. The fighters were all primed to deploy at that instant as well. The 5 hours he'd put to good use, and the fleet was running right on time. They'd formed up before the jump, and they'd all be slaving their navicomps to the lead ships so they could make the jump in formation. If everything went according to plan, they'd come out right in front of the Sith fleet and begin their drive forward as soon as they hit real space. "Stay sharp, stay loose, and keep your wits about you," Mick said as he watched the monitor he'd installed on the cockpit. It showed him a visual of the whole fleet, and fed him all the information on each ship. "I'll be commanding from the Firebird as planned, but I won't always be issuing orders. We've run through countless scenarios, and we've been training non-stop. You're all ready for this. Believe it. Believe in yourselves, trust in the Force, and make the decisions you know you can. Think on your feet, and we may pull through this thing." Ari smirked at him from where she was seated in the navigator's chair. "Nice speech, Nerf Herder." He heard his voice in his head. He winked. From Brink, he could sense nothing but calm, which Mick appreciated greatly. His respect for Brink's fighting skills rivaled his respect for Wedge and Tycho. Brink hadn't an inkling of Force sensitivity, yet Mick had seen him pull maneuvers that even a Jedi would be hard-pressed to repeat. The old smuggler had vaped his share of imp aces and wannabe pirates, and the son of a bantha was still a hot hand on the stick. And all of it he did without the Force. In Mick's eyes, Brink was probably the best pilot he had in the fleet. The numbers trickled down to 0. "Mark!" Mick called, and a second later he could feel the almost imperceptible lurch of a capital ship entering hyperspace. Missed. "Multiple contacts, my lord." The report came over his headset. Directly ahead, 87 capital ships. All units, move forward and engage, he commanded, rolling his fighter to port and shoving his control stick forward. The craft and his squadron rolled out from under the executor and were joined by 2 more squadrons. They fanned out among the fleet like minnows in a school of Corellian pike. Executor, take point. Resilience and vengeance, take your wings and fold them around the Jedi. We'll trap them and pound them. All fighters launch, Mick ordered as he and Brink piloted the Firebird out of New Hope's hangar bay and into open space. He scanned the scene before him and instantly saw what was happening. Change of plans, he called over the command frequency. All fighters, target the executor and prepare to launch missiles on my mark. Vale, have the fleet tighten the cone down to a point. We'll punch straight through the middle and come around the other side. Fighters, after launching your missiles, get back inside the formation. Stefan, if you can hear this, drop your hammer when my fighters launch the salvo. A chorus of affirmations rang through his headset as Mick targeted the Super Star Destroyer at the point of the Sith fleet. Ranging shots were beginning to flash between the 2 fleets, but nothing was taking damage. Yet. He watched his targeting reticle slowly shift from green to red, and a steady tone sounded in the cockpit. All fighters, use my targeting data and fire missiles on my mark. Mark! Hundreds upon hundreds of purple-white streaks shot out from the Jedi formation as fighters loosed 2 proton torpedoes apiece. They converged about 3 kilometers from the Super Star Destroyer. Into what looked like a massive comet, intent on plowing through the 8-kilometer Super Star Destroyer. The executor's guns opened up on the cloud of death coming its way, but it couldn't stop them all. The massive ship was eclipsed entirely in white light for a second or two as the torpedoes slammed into the forward shields. They buckled and failed, and more torpedoes slammed into the hull, peeling away sheets of armor and melting turbolaser batteries. Fighters, fall back to positions inside the cone of the fleet, Mick ordered as he pulled the Firebird up and around in a corkscrewing loop towards his fleet. Vale, concentrate all fire on the executor and have the fleet begin its charge. We'll take out their flagship and then rip through the middle of their formation. With a bit of skill and luck, we'll reform on the other side and start picking apart their rear. Stefan, now would be a great time to unleash hell, Mick called over the comm as the fleet began its push. Sheets of red energy converged and slammed into the bare hull of the executor, vaporizing sheet upon sheet of armor and ripping out the other end. Plumes of fire erupted from the ship as the atmosphere escaped multiple breaches. Then the core went nova, and the fleet had their hull. Stefan, now would be a great time to unleash hell, he heard over the comm, and he started to activate the timers aboard the repulse and uncloak the ship remotely. I hope you have your shades on, he said as he started arming Blue Talon's weapon systems. Because here it comes. Master, another Jedi ship has decloaked among our fleet. We're opening fire. Another ship? He asked as he turned his fighter over to see the newly arrived ship. Something didn't feel right. Wait! He yelled into the comm. Back away from that ship before... The first action in the program that Mick and Stefan had sliced into the Repulse's computers was to fire all of her turbolasers at anything that moved that was within range. Since the Sith pilots couldn't predict a computer's firing pattern, they were getting shot down left and right along with the other frigates and cruisers getting their shields overloaded until their energy reserves for the turbolasers were depleted. The beryllium lining the structural points exploded in a shaped fashion, sending hull plates out into their surrounding ships like fragmentation grenades. As the last explosion occurred, ships all over were being speared by the fragments. Stefan had programmed all 8 of Repulse's fusion generators, to go critical and lined the compartment with the rest of the beryllium and Nergon-14 charges left to spare in the fleet. The resulting explosion produced so much heat that it melted the armor plating of the cruisers and Star Destroyers surrounding the ship. Fighters that were still too close were vaporized instantly, while the other support ships stopped moving as the atmosphere inside the crew areas was superheated and burned the crews alive. In all the confusion, the Jedi saw Blue Talon flying out of the explosion's light like a phoenix that had just risen from the ashes, her guns blazing away as Stefan started tearing into the Sith fleet. And the Jedi took heart in his battle cry as they, too, charged into the maelstrom. The Jedi fleet was surrounded in a maelstrom of turbolaser and ion fire for 2 solid minutes. Visibility was 0 as they cut their way through the Sith Armada. Damage reports came in a torrent of noise and static over the comm, but Mick shunted the feeling of remorse beginning to rise inside him. The time for mourning would come, but not now. I need to stay focused so that those who've died will have fewer companions in the afterlife. The Firebird and the fighter squadrons flew close as they huddled inside the relative safety of the Jedi formation. The fire pounding them from outside came in sheets of green and blue energy. The Jedi returned fire on their run, and Mick was delighted to see a large portion of the opposition vaporized from his and Stefan's ploy. Those that survived the blast were sufficiently damaged as the Jedi cut their way through the middle. And then they were on the other side. "All units, come around and flank them," Mick ordered. "Vale, you have command of the capital ships. Take them apart. Red and green squadrons form up on me. The rest of the fighter squadrons are to engage enemy fighters. Stick close to the fleet and draw fire away from our cruisers. Keep your eyes out for bombers, and give them hell." Affirmations rang through his headset as the fleet carried out his commands. Red Squadron's XJ-3s took up positions on Mick's starboard and port. Green's A-Wings formed a tight cluster behind the freighter and its X-Wing cover. The idea was to shield them from enemy sensors. It was a classic A-Wing slash with a twist of Corellian bravado. Skill and bravery would carry a lot in this battle. Red Group, slave your targeting telemetry to the Firebird and prepare to launch 2 more torpedoes. "I see you, Lord. Welcome in." Mick let the order hang in the air for a moment as he pushed his ship through a rolling spiral that kept the Imstar dupes he was running at from getting a clean shot. "Green, follow the torpedoes in. The shields will buckle. Empty your magazines of concussion missiles on my target. Go for the shield generators. Blech. Go for the shield generators first, and then slag her. Burn it for the fleet to reload, and wait. Oh. Okay, wait. And then burn space back to the fleet to reload and wait for more orders." "Going for the deuce, Grandpa?" Turlan's voice came over the comm. He was a lot calmer than Mick had expected, but there was a bit of excitement creeping into his voice. "Hit 'em where they least expect it," Mick nodded, though he knew Turlan couldn't see him. "Almost at range." A steady tone sounded in Mick's cockpit. "Mark." A veritable torrent of proton torpedoes streaked through space toward the broadside of the Imstar Deuce. Not waiting for the explosion, Mick pulled back on his control yoke. Red Squadron, break and reform on me," he ordered. "Green, she's all yours." The A-Wings blasted in after the torpedoes, slowing their speed as they cut through the opening in the shields and laced the Imstar Deuce with concussion missiles. The generators blew within a few seconds, and the battleship was quickly engulfed in flames. "Green Squadron, report," Mick ordered as he rolled through another volley of turbolaser fire from a nearby Victory-class Star Destroyer. "Lost Greens 9 and 10, came the reply, strong and convicted. "It got hot in there, but the Deuce is down." "Good work. Head back to your cruiser for reload and join the defense fighters," Mick ordered. "As ordered." "Reds, on me," Mick said as he rolled the Firebird through a series of twists and turns that had him pointed back into the thick of things. "Enemy fighters are getting thick in here, but the capital ships can't fire when we're between them, or they risk hitting their own. Even though I don't hold any stake in them, let's even the odds, shall we?" "Aye, sir," came the resounding reply. "Brink, take over." Mick said as he slipped off the headset comm and got up from the pilot's chair. I'm taking the dorsal quads. Just keep us moving and try to stay between the cruisers. Alright, if you feel like vaping some Sith, the ventral guns are more heavily shielded. You got it, bud, Brink replied as Mick ran down the corridor and climbed the ladder to the dorsal quad. He strapped in and slipped on the headset. I'm set, Brink. I'd say put him in the money lane, but finding targets isn't going to be hard in this mess. The rogue grinned as he loosed a quad burst that separated a Sith fighter from its engines as it streaked by. Status report, the Master ordered as he vaped one of the Jedi fighters harassing the Executor. We've lost 30% of our fleet, my lord, and 20 are reporting hull damage. We've lost ISD-2 Revenge, my lord, the officer aboard the Superstar Destroyer replied. His voice was subdued, but there was still an edge to it. Losses are expected, soldier, the Master replied. We'll hold. Have the fleet reformed to face the opposition, put our strongest ships forward, and call back the damage so they can repair their shields. As you will it, my lord. And find me the Firebird, the Master added as he clipped the wings off an XJ-3. Order Death Squadron to try for missile locks and have them feed the telemetry to any nearby battleship. Fire if you have a solution. In the meantime, get me the ship's location. If Death can't do the job, I'll lead my squadron on a kill run. In the meantime, concentrate fire on Blue Talon. That blasted suit's done enough damage for one day. Aye, sir. And I'm going to stop there because we're in an ad. Yay. Actually, that was well timed because ad. So. And I see just sniper in the house. I knew that the bot was going to have fun with that one. Oh. Right. Alright. Lord, make sure you refresh the stream, please. You should know, once you do that, you should no longer have ads. I'm actually gonna turn that down just a little. You're very welcome, of course. Oh, hey, look at you! Fancy first badge. Fancy, fancy. I see you with that badge. Alright. I stopped because there was an ad. Oh, jeez. I have no control over that, sadly. Unfortunately, I have no control over the volume on the ads. I do apologize. That is unfortunately not something I can do. I bet it did. I bet it did. Yeah, they tend to be kind of loud. So, yay. No more ads for you for a while. Alright. And I see the sniper snuck in. Welcome, sir. Alright. There we go. Alright. Just trying to figure out where I was. Alright. Aboard New Hope. Making her rounds of New Hope's medbay, Callista felt Anar's presence fade from her mind. She squeezed her eyes shut against the pain, knowing that he'd given his life in defense of all the Jedi stood for. She drew a deep breath and pushed the pain away before continuing her rounds. Stefan was dodging left and right as he focused the beam cannon's crosshairs on the nearest imp star, but the Sith fighters and escort ships had made it a point of interest to want a piece of his hide. I guess it doesn't take a genius to figure out which ones can do the most damage, he mumbled as he picked off a fighter with the head cannons. Mick, they look like they want to gang up on me here. Same here. I've got a whole squadron after me. I think I'm gathering a bit more attention, but that may be just because I'm in a mobile suit. I'd say so, he heard Mick on the other end. Wanna trade up? Just meet me in the middle, Stefan said as he pulled Blue Talon around. You pick off some of mine, I'll pick off some of yours. Fair deal, Brink chimed in. Coming at you. What the hell? Dylan asked himself as he saw Blue Talon and Firebird running right for each other. Dad, you're headed straight toward... And then he saw it. Firebird had dived just before the two ships would have collided, and both started opening fire on the Sith on the other's tail. Should have seen that one coming. Solid strike, Stefan said as he pulled up the tactical boards on his left. Mick, we're still getting trouble from that imp-star, but they're not letting me get a clear shot. Why take a shot? Ari asked him. You've punched through a ship before. That was a Kara-class cruiser, Stefan reminded her, not an imp-star deuce. But I don't see why not. What is he doing? The Sith captain in charge of Invidious said as he watched Blue Talon revert to its flight mode and start charging at his ship. I want the forward shields reinforced. Now! Here we go, Stefan said as he fired and used the Force to hurl 2 shadow bombs into the Star Destroyer ahead of him. The shields lit up like a decorated life date tree before crashing down just moments before the mobile suit flew through. Stefan swept the wings back and streamlined the profile as he approached his target. He could already see the bridge crew running out of the room as the captain was screaming orders, and he could feel the man trying to call upon the Force to divert his mobile suit. But Stefan wouldn't have that. Mick looked up just in time to see Blue Talon punch through the bridge of the Star Destroyer. It took several moments before he saw the mobile suit punch back out from the spine of the command tower, several explosions following behind. It seemed not even seconds later before it transformed back into warrior mode and he could see Stefan pumping 2 more shadow bombs into the ship's engines. That Star Destroyer wasn't going anywhere. Nice job, he said through the comm. How are you holding up? Not too bad, Stefan said as he looked over the damage reports. I probably don't want to do that again. Stresses got pretty high when I did it, and I don't want to cause any damage to the structural framework. I don't think they've got that many large capital ships left, Mick told him. We're good enough to take them out the old-fashioned way. With pleasure. Then again, Mick thought, as Brink relayed the battle stats from the cockpit, they've still got us outgunned by a lot. The Executor is still kicking, but they've pulled her back. The other SSD, however. All craft. Ignore the SSD tagged Nemesis. It's a shell. Are you sure, Mick? Brink's voice came over the comm. It's an SSD and scanners show the shields are up. Take a good look at her, Brink, Mick replied grimly. Shasa, the smuggler hissed. Yeah, Mick nodded to himself as he vaped a Sith fighter that had come too close for comfort. You noticed it too. The Nemesis hung in space on the starboard wing of the Sith fleet. It fired occasionally, but it was sporadic and never aimed at anything. Combined with the fact that it was only firing 24 of the 200 to 300 turbolasers that Super Star Destroyer boasted, it proved that it was a bluff. Call all fighters and cruisers off Nemesis, Mick ordered. Reposition and form up with the fleet. We've almost evened the odds. Now it's a slugging match. Put our strongest ships forward and pull those injured back. Let them rebuild their shields and then switch. Keep New Hope out of danger and make sure any injured get to her as soon as possible. If the fight starts to go downhill, jump the New Hope to Coruscant and pray for those of us left. Affirmations rang through the headset, if somewhat somberly, and the fleet began to form up as ordered. Alright. Okay. We knew we were outmatched when we came here, people, Mick said as he dusted yet another Sith fighter that was harassing him. You've all proven yourselves and more in this fight. I could ask nothing more from you. You fought like heroes, worthy of having your names etched in Durasteel next to the legends that came before you. Luke Skywalker, Wedge Antilles, Corran Horn, Han Solo. You all share a quality with those people that gives me hope. Courage. Brink threw the bird through a twisting spiral around an enemy Imstar Deuce. The torpedoes following the Firebird slammed into the enemy's shields. That courage fuels the fire within my soul right now. That courage raises my hopes for this war, what may be our last battle. It is that courage that lets me know that there is indeed something worth fighting for in this galaxy. It lets me know that even if we are defeated, even if one of us survives, evil in all its forms will be opposed. Mick released a calming breath and shut off the open comm to talk to Brink without the fleet hearing. Brink, get us and the Reds back to the fleet. We're going to charge them. There wasn't even a slight moment of hesitation in Brink's voice as he said, Aye, Mick. Mick flipped the open comm back on. Know this. I am a rogue. I do not abide by the code of the Jedi, nor am I particularly keen on all that they believe in, but I have never been more proud to be in such company. If this is to be our end, then so be it. But I would have us make such an end. The fleet was assembled, and the squadrons were ready. Brink kept the Firebird at the point as they prepared to charge. The Sith Armada also began forming up, and a grin played on Mick's face as he saw that they were down to 70 capital ships and one limping Super Star Destroyer. The Jedi were holding at 50 capital ships, and none were limping, for the most part. All ships, pick a target and go on my mark. Fly well, shoot straight, and give them hell, Mick said. He climbed out of the gunwale and went to the cockpit, retaking the pilot's chair from Brink. This is going to be rough, Brink. Ari, Mick said as he reached for his headset. Love, I promised you I'd live through this, and I will. But if you want to take the escape pod and get on to New Hope, now would be the time. And I'm going to turn that down just a little bit. Okay. I will come for you on Coruscant. Brink, same thing, buddy. You're one hell of a hand on the stick, but this isn't your war, and you don't need to get yourself killed. All ships, hold position until I give the word, Mick said into the headset comm. He looked to Ari and Brink as he awaited their answer. All ships form up and prepare to hold the line, the master ordered as he rolled through a long loop that put him above the prow of the Executor. The Super Star Destroyer was nearly crippled, and fires raged inside the hull still, but his force was holding strong, and their conviction never wavered. The Jedi have begun to prove themselves worthy, the Master grinned as his fleet moved slowly into formation. They mean to charge us head on. This is a warrior's day. This is a day for death, honor, and glorious battle. Remember what you fight for. They shall break upon our line like water upon a cliff. You've done well, my soldiers. Your names shall be remembered. He saw the Firebird on his scanners taking the position at the point of the Jedi fleet. Brave, Conduit. The Master grinned. Now we shall meet head on, you and I, and we shall see through whom the Force truly acts. All fighters, remain with the fleet, the Master ordered. I am taking point. We charge when they do, and I shall lead you all to glory. The sounds of battle cries and cheers erupted in the Master's headset, and he grinned tightly. Had he asked, they would have followed him to hell and enjoyed the ride. He fed off their confidence and allowed a full smile to blossom on his face. This would be chaos and beauty. Mist. Surface. Einar opened his eyes slowly and looked around. There was light everywhere. Nothing was visible but bright, white light. He looked down at himself and saw clean robes. He didn't feel in pain either. This isn't right. I remember blood and fire. Don't worry, you haven't gone far. Einar looked up and saw Kevin standing there smiling. Am I dead? Einar asked. Kevin just smiled. You could say you've crossed onto a path that is not yet meant for you. Well, that's a relief. Kevin smiled once more and walked closer to Einar, pulling him into a hug. Einar returned it. He had definitely missed his friend. Did I do it? Einar asked, referring to the mission. Nothing left but debris, my friend. It worked. Though it wasn't a real threat, the act itself was worthy of a Jedi. It was a scarecrow. I should have felt it. Don't worry about it. It was courageous of you, and it helped. With one Super Star Destroyer in flames, the hopes of the Jedi fighting in this war grew. You gave them a fighting chance in their hearts. When you put it like that, I feel a little better, Einar said, grinning. But why am I here? Kevin looked puzzled. Truth be told, I don't know. You're still alive. Badly hurt, but alive. You shouldn't be here. Einar stroked his beard in contemplation. I might be dying or comatose. Kevin shook his head. No, I felt you crash, and I know you're alive and will pull out of this, whatever happens. I brought him here, Kevin, a soft voice said, coming from the light. Einar froze and watched the silhouette of a slender woman form within the light. Tears began to form in his eyes, and he fell to his knees just as the spirit of his late wife came closer. Einar looked to where Kevin was standing and saw his friend smiling. It looks like you have a visitor. May the Force be with you, Einar, and take care of my son, Kevin said as he disappeared, leaving Einar and Kate behind. Einar couldn't speak. He just sat there frozen. Kate slowly walked closer. She was smiling. Her hair was loose and flowing, and it was like her entire being was filled with light. She took Einar's hands and pulled him to his feet. He couldn't stop the tears as he was once again face to face with his wife. Shh, don't cry, she said, wiping the tears away. He couldn't look her in the eye. He was too ashamed. I'm sorry, Kate, for what I did. I dishonored myself, the Jedi, and your memory. She just smiled. We all make mistakes, but you've come so far since then. You've accepted what happened, and you forgave yourself, your friends, and your family. We have all forgiven you, and we love you. Einar looked up and met her gaze. I've missed you so much, he said as he pulled her closer and hugged her tightly. He kissed her for what seemed like an eternity, and felt all of the guilt and anger dissipate from within. She held him close before she looked up at him. You must go now. You're needed, and your friends need your help. He squeezed her hand. I know. I love you. She let go of his hand. I love you too. It seemed an instant later he snapped awake in the cockpit of the downed fighter. The smell of burned wires and blood filled his nostrils. His eyes were still wet from crying, but when he reached up to dry his face, something didn't work. He looked at his hand. It was broken in multiple locations. He couldn't help his friends like this, or even help himself. His entire body ached as he tried to move, but he'd lost a lot of blood, and he needed help. Stefan, hear me. Let me turn that down just a little. I'm going deaf over here. Oh, God's above. Calista jerked back to reality when she'd felt Einar's call within the Force. It was weak, but she had felt it regardless. She strengthened it and sent it on. She then jumped to her feet and sprinted across the med bay, punching the ship-to-ship comm. Stefan, scan for Einar's fighter. We need to get him here yesterday. She knew Einar didn't have much time. He was fading, but his sense was steady for the moment. A few Jedi in the medbay looked up as she spoke into the comm, wondering. She didn't have time to explain. Back across the medbay she ran, skidding into her office as she stopped to gather supplies. Her Padawan looked up. Master? Callista slowed down long enough to say over her shoulder, "Prep the ICU immediately. We have someone inbound." The younger Jedi nodded and hurried to do as she was asked. Rounding her desk, Callista flung open the supply cabinet, grabbing everything she needed. She staggered slightly as she exited the office, and her Padawan appeared, removing some of the items from her arms. "Let me help you with that, Master." Callista nodded as they entered the ICU. Setting her burdens down quickly, she set to work. She had never dealt with anything quite like this, but her skills were up to the task. Her assistant continued prepping the ICU as Callista expanded her senses to try and find Einar. He was weak, but his pain blazed like a beacon in her mind. "There you are." She touched his mind, helping to push away some of his pain. "Einar, I'm here. Let me help, please." An idea formed itself in her mind, and she presented it to him. "I can put you in a healing trance to slow the bleeding until you get here." She waited as he made his decision. In her mind, she could sense his acceptance. Stefan felt the call and heard Callista's message. "We need him back," Mick told Stefan over the comm. "You can't spare me just yet," Stefan told him as he checked the systems. "We can't let him die down there," Ari yelled. "Stefan, you've got to—" "And leave all of you staring down the executor's barrels?" Stefan asked in return as he finished checking his weapons. "We need to cripple her at least before anything can happen." "I thought you said Blue Talon couldn't handle another ramming," Brink said. "I have an idea," Stefan told them as he lined the suit up for his run. "It's your call, Mick." "You're right about one thing, Stefan," Mick replied. "Einar can wait. I feel horrible saying that, but we have more pressing matters and can't afford to send one of our strongest weapons out of the fray." The look on Ari's face was a mixture of horror at leaving a man behind and resignation as she realized that she'd probably have made the same decision. Mick was holding well under the strain of command, and she began to wonder if she'd been underestimating him the whole time. Not that she'd tell him that, of course. Force forbid the man get a boost to his ego, and the universe might rupture. "Stefan, we're at a standoff right now," Mick said as he gazed at the Sith fleet dead ahead. "Either one of us makes a move, and all hell will break loose. Let's hold for a few minutes and try to catch our—" "Did I just hear Mick Rondin say he was going to hesitate?" A familiar voice broke through the static on the open comm. "I think you did," came another, very familiar voice. "It also sounds like he's not looking forward to all hell breaking loose." "I'll be an Agramar nerf herder. Death must change people." On his scanners, Mick saw nothing, but by bouncing the signal, he could guess the communications were coming from either side of him. Sure enough, as he looked out to port and starboard, two very familiar ships materialized out of the nothingness that had been there moments before. Off to his port was what looked like an old Imperial Lambda-class shuttle, but the weapons bristling on it belied the power the old thing packed. To his starboard was a fire spray, and there was no mistaking the added turbo lasers mounted above the ship's rotational gun turrets. "Nick? Vince?" Mick asked. "How? What? Where? I don't remember him being this inarticulate either," Nick quipped. "Maybe it's not really him," Vince's voice replied cautiously. "Hey, that freighter looks like a Ranker's chew toy. Watch it, blast your brains, or you'll find yourself on the receiving end of a laser bath." "Yep." Nick Randar's grin could almost be heard in his laugh. "It's him," Vincent Rain agreed. "What are you guys doing here?" Mick asked. The Sith fleet seemed content with the standoff and wasn't making a move to engage. "We heard you were back," Nick replied. "And we couldn't let you have all the fun," Vince added. "Besides, it looks like you could use the help, and Vince and I have been dying to give these new cloaking shields a try," Nick said as he wiggled his wings like an impatient fighter jock. "New cloaking shields?" Mick asked. "Yeah." Vince sounded excited. "You can see through these." "Got 'em from the Republic military," Nick added. "How in the force did a couple of rimrats like you two scrounge up enough cash to pay for those?" Mick asked as he looked towards Ari. She shrugged and shook her head. "Don't look at me, love," she said with a sly grin. Would you listen to this guy? Vince sounded wounded. Are you sure this is Mick we're talking to? Well, I was. Maybe death really does change a guy, Nick replied slowly. Pay? Mick, we stole them. What do you think we are, respectable? Mick's laughter filled the headset comm, and the warm feeling in his gut began to spread throughout his body. A lot had changed when I got back, guys. I'm so glad you haven't. Will you listen to this nerf herder? Vince shot back. You'd think he'd gone soft or something. Just shut up and tell us when to charge. Space it, Vince. Mick grinned. We go on my mark, but I just got an idea for you and Nick. I want you and Nick to cloak and break off the run when we charge. Find the 2 strongest ships out there, unload whatever missiles you've got, and feed the telemetry to a nearby cruiser. If you guys are still as good as I remember, it shouldn't be a problem. If? Nick's voice was full of surprise. If we're still good? When this is over, you owe us a tavern, damn it, not just a drink. Whatever. Mick shrugged. Just be ready. The rogue turned to his wife. Well, babe? He could see in her eyes that she would stay with him on the Firebird even if he flew it through a star, and the same loyalty and determination also burned in Brink's eyes. He just wanted to hear them say the words before he gave the order to charge. You should know better, Rogue. I'm at your side from here to eternity, Ari smiled. All the way, Mick, Brink replied, nodding in agreement towards Micron. He also heard Nick and Vince cheer over the comm in reply. Mick gave his wife a knowing grin. Hey, they knew you were back not long after I knew you were back. I'd had them running errands for me. They've been busy, otherwise they would have been here sooner. Ari sent to her husband, who gave her a traditional smuggler's grin. Let's do this, Brink said, taking Ari's hint as he and Mick prepared to charge. Okay. I'm gonna pause and get a drink of water. Been reading a lot. Alright. Have at it, Stefan heard over his headset, and he ran the engine throttle to the stop, sending his mobile suit streaking toward the executor. Almost in range, he said as he thumbed the beam cannon to its highest setting. While he was in flight mode, the cannon was mounted in front to make the nose of the ship and act as the opening he would need. At full speed, Stefan only had a few moments before his craft would hit the Super Star Destroyer's bow. She can't take another one of those, Mick yelled into the comm. You said it yourself. The crosshairs went from green to yellow to red in a second as Stefan lined up on the executor's bow and fired. The shot hit precisely at the point and started shearing the hull and superstructure away. It continued to burn down the ship's length before the beam burned out a massive hole at the rear of the ship. The secondary explosions were already happening when Mick saw Stefan fly his mobile suit into the hole his shot had created. He couldn't tell what Stefan was doing, but the continuous chain of explosions along the Super Star Destroyer were tearing off pieces of the ship from the inside. He half expected to see Blue Talon come out from the back of the executor, but it never did. What in the... Seconds passed like minutes before Blue Talon emerged not from the stern of the Super Star Destroyer, but up through the command tower. It was in its warrior mode, holding its beam saber in hand as it carved its way out of the superstructure. Stefan side-slipped the mobile suit just in time to avoid the fireball explosion that erupted through the hole he'd made through the command tower, and jetted away from the executor before a massive explosion rocked the mobile suit as the Super Star Destroyer's main engines overloaded. This caused the aft third of the ship to shear away. But Mick's attention wasn't on the Super Star Destroyer. He could see the shower of sparks and power arcs coming from several joints in Blue Talon's framework. Are you alright? I felt better. Give me a second. I felt better, Stefan replied wearily as Mick Canari's image appeared on the corner of his screen. Stefan was holding a hand to his forehead, where he'd started bleeding. I've lost some maneuverability, and I have to recharge the beam cannon after that last shot. What all did you do in there? Ari asked as Stefan tore the lining of his robes and wrapped it around his head to put pressure on the wound. I found out that my shot had exploded a torpedo magazine, Stefan told them. The explosion made a large cavern for me that allowed me to change modes and start carving away with my saber. I made it to the main reactors and planted what shadow bombs I had left, and then carved my way up through the tower. How'd I do? And you thought I was nuts, both Mick and Ari yelled at him. I'm still good for the fight, Stefan said as he pumped a few shots into a passing Sith fighter that tried to strafe him. Let's get him. Right. Give me 1 second. New Hope. Callista had been monitoring the comm while she was prepping. When she heard Mick, she wanted to scream. I can't believe them, she thought to herself as she fought back her anger. She had to turn away so her Padawan wouldn't see how hard she struggled. Einar's out there dying and they just leave him. She shot her hand out and grabbed a medkit off the shelf as her Padawan looked up. Master, what's wrong? She looked over at her Padawan and the intense emotion in her eyes caused the young woman to step back in surprise. I need to go to Einar. He's dying. His wounds are life-threatening. She turned away and rushed out of the medbay. Oops, and I'm going to stop there because there's an ad. So let me get some water. Alright, we're back. I like to take the ad breaks to get water, things like that. Thank you so much for hanging out through those ads. They help support the channel. Alright. Turning, she rushed out of the medbay, leaving behind a very bewildered Padawan. She sprinted down the corridors and reached the landing bay in 2 minutes flat. She skidded around the corner and entered the bay, not even out of breath. The mechanic on duty glanced up as she entered and rose to his feet. How may I help you, Master? I need to borrow one of the courier shuttles right away. You can take the courier shuttle over there. He pointed and bowed. Nodding her head, and in thanks, she sprinted across the deck and boarded the small shuttle. She hadn't flown for a while, but she sat down and took a moment to familiarize herself while she cold-started the engines. She could feel Einar fading quickly as she brought the shuttle up on its repulsors and angled it out of the bay and down towards Mist. Pushing the throttle to the bulkhead, she streaked across the open space. She knew there wasn't much time. As she hit the atmosphere, Einar's presence faded from her mind. The mental anguish almost sent her spinning out of control, but she wrestled the shuttle back on course. She could still help him. The shuttle slid to a halt, and Callista palmed the hatch release. Better keep a lookout for mistmakers, she thought. She could hardly see her hand in front of her face through the thick mist that engulfed her as she disembarked. She could see a trail of debris and broken branches not too far off, and sensed the disturbance in the forest caused by the fighter's demise. She headed in that direction as a full-out sprint. I hope I'm not too late. She rounded the edge of the wrecked fighter and her breath caught in her throat as she fought back the urge to vomit. Einar lay in a twisted heap, his head lolling to the side. His right hand was a ruined mess, and he lay in a pool of his own blood. Turlon's fighter raced in between Sith fighters, giving them a run for their money, and then he felt it. Master! He silently breathed, and then he felt Callista's presence beside him, down on the planet below. He steered out of the firefight and quickly set a path for Callista's shuttle. The fighter descended through a cloud of mist, and soon he began the landing cycle and touched down on the firm ground. Oh, gods! Falling to her knees, she reached out to Einar with her hands and through the force. Where his presence had been, there was now a black void. There's still a chance. She leaned over and began chest compressions and CPR. She bathed him with the force as she did so, repairing what damage she could, at least temporarily. Suddenly, he turned his head and coughed weakly. She smiled crookedly. Don't you ever do that again. I won't always be here to rescue you. Einar laughed weakly, but it turned into a coughing fit instead. Master, Turlon breathed, crouching beside Callista. Her danger sense flared, and she threw a force shield around Einar as Turlon drew his saber. A mistmaker reached out to them with its dripping tentacles. Ducking beyond its reach, he hacked off the tentacles before chopping the creature in half. Callista extended the shield to cover herself and Einar once more as the creature's guts rained down on them, sizzling against the barrier. If any of that had touched us, she thought, and shuddered. Help me get him on the shuttle. We need to get him back to the medbay, immediately. Turlon nodded, and together they stretched out through the forest, their energy binding as they levitated Einar's body from the ground and into the shuttle that Callista had piloted down to the planet. I'll escort you back to New Hope, Turlon said, before sprinting to his fighter. The two ships lifted off and set course for New Hope in orbit above. Ari felt Einar's force signature growing dimmer by the moment, and she knew she would never reach him in time, even if Mick crash-landed the Firebird on Mist, so she could be there with him. Sorry. Thank the Force. Callista and Turlon are there with him, Ari thought to herself, feeling the two young people preparing to depart for New Hope. Time for you to show me what you've learned, girl. You know all the techniques I taught you. Learn them well. You and Turlon get him to New Hope. I can't help you on this one, Ari said, hoping to instill courage in the young woman, entrusting Einar's life to her hands. The Sith are beginning to land forces on Mist. Quite a strong army, too, Brink said as he read off the numbers from the scopes. Ari looked at Mick and swallowed hard. You'll have to meet them planet-side and end this the old-fashioned way, Ari sent to her husband, knowing it wouldn't be long before the Sith would beckon the Jedi to battle on the ground. Callista slapped the comm. This is Master Jassarin. I need priority landing clearance. Have a crash team waiting for me. Acknowledged, New Hope replied. Landing the shuttle gently, she rose and palmed the hatch release to admit the crash team. We need to get him to the ICU now. The medics nodded and rushed him out of the bay, with Callista following close behind. Turlon caught up with her in the corridor. He still wore his flight gear and had his lightsaber in his hand. I can take him from here, Callista assured him. He'll be okay. I promise. Turlon eyed the limp form of his master as the medics took him into the medbay. She followed his gaze and then placed a hand on his shoulder. He's in good hands, she said. Trust me. The young knight nodded, his eyes taking a faraway look. She had seen it before and recognized a collapse before it happened. Why don't you sit in here? She guided Turlon into a small examination room. Just rest for a while. I'll have someone check on you in a little bit. Turlon nodded once more, before wordlessly following her instruction. She was slightly worried, but she left him and prepared for surgery. But not in the usual sense of the word. Einar was stretched out on the bed in the intensive care unit, already in a healing trance. The medics had unclothed him from the waist up so that Callista could work on him more easily. She cringed as she took in his battered and broken form. His right hand was a jumble of raw flesh and shattered bone. She rested her hands lightly on his torso and sank into the healing meditation. His insides felt wrong. His broken ribs had pierced the left lung, causing it to collapse. She could extract the rib from the lung and fuse it back together using her healing skills. She knew he would need at least a day in a bacta tank to heal the surface wounds. Taking his mangled hand in hers, she gently set the bones, one by one, using the force to dull the pain. He had lost a great deal of blood while he lay bleeding on mist. She pulled some matching his type from the medical stores. She gently inserted the needle in his arm before continuing to work on his wounds. It had been 6 hours since Callista had saved Einar's life. She dozed in a chair beside his bed, ready to help him when he awoke. She felt a light touch on her mind. "Hail, my savior." Einar looked over at her and grinned. She laughed for the first time in what felt like days. "Well, look who came back from the dead. You don't look half bad for a dead man." He grinned, and then started to sit up, and Callista rose to help him. "Your ribs are still knitting, so you might feel stiff and sore for a few days. Your hand was pretty torn up, and that arm was broken in 2 places." He looked down at his right arm, which rested in a sling. His right hand was swathed in white gauze, and then he looked up at her. "How long?" 6 hours. I had to stick you in a bacta tank for most of it. You were a mess." He nodded. "Any chance I could?" She knew what he was going to ask before he said it. "No way in hell are you going back out there. Not on my watch." He sighed. "Callista, you know how much they need me as well as I do. Please, let me help them." She sighed. "Well, you have a point. Not many people can pull the stunt that you did." He looked down briefly. "Yeah, and I died." She was quiet for a second. "Well, you're here now, right? Please, Callista, give me something for the pain and let me out of this place. I want to help." She sighed heavily. "All right." She reached into the cabinet on the wall, extracting a painkiller and stimulant. "This is pretty powerful, so please be careful. I don't want to have to come after you." He simply grinned. And that is the end of chapter 12. Alright. That's the end of chapter 12. And I'm going to stop reading there because I don't want to be up all night. Alright. So I'm going to stop reading with that. For those of you who are new to the stream, well, just in general for everybody, I did want to let everybody know, kind of as a reminder, that I will not be streaming the week of August 5th at all. I will actually be away. I'll be on vacation. So my 2 streams for that week, which would be the 7th and I think it's the 10th? Let me double check. I think it's the 7th and the 10th. I'm gonna double check myself. Yes. So, let's see. Yeah, so my SWTOR stream that's supposed to be on Wednesday the 7th is cancelled. And my workshop stream that is supposed to be Sunday, August 11th is also cancelled because I will not be home until Monday. And unfortunately, I'm not sure if I'll have capability to stream at all where I'm going to be. So I just decided that it was probably best to not even worry about it. So my next stream for you guys is probably going to be well, I'm streaming on the I'm streaming on the... Anyway, one sec. Brain. So my next stream is going to be, I think, the 24th? Yeah. So my next stream is going to be July 24th, which is going to be SWTOR. And then I'll have a reading stream on the 31st. And then, let me see. Oh. So the 24th is SWTOR. And then I have a workshop stream on the 28th. And then a reading stream on the 31st. And then my next stream isn't going to be until, I think, the 14th? Something like that. I can't even think straight. Yeah, the 14th after that. I will be in Wisconsin for a big youth event. For those who don't know, I work with a youth group called Pathfinders. It's similar to Boy Scouts, I suppose, at least in structure. And every 5 years they have a big international camporee. So I'm going to go and have some fun. And so I'll be gone for 8-9 days, something like that. So I will have a couple of streams before I leave. And then I will see you guys again on the 14th after that. So I guess I will see you guys again on the 24th? Yes. For some SWTOR, if you guys are interested. And my camera's being a punk and not focusing. I don't know. There we go. My camera's weird sometimes. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know why, it just doesn't like to focus sometimes. Not sure what's going on with that. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know why it does that. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, it's really annoying. I'm not sure why it does that. So I am going to actually raid out to... Oh, I think I raided Kim recently, so... Let's see. Trying to see... You know what? I'm gonna raid Kim anyway, because I want those cozy vibes. Okay. So if you guys would hang out and follow me along on that raid, that would be much appreciated. Kim, for the day, is a maker and crafter streamer. She's also part of the Survivor Squad, which is one of the communities that I am part of. Really chill. She does crafty things, and she plays some games. Cozy games like Palia. I'm not sure what else, but that one I do know that she plays. So she's super chill. And you guys can snag those raid messages. The top one is for anybody that is subscribed to the channel. The second one is for anyone that is a follower of the channel. So please feel free to follow me along on that raid, and we're gonna go say hi to Kim. I was just looking at her. Let's see. Oh gosh. Okay. I'm gonna pull her up over here. Feeling so discombobulated this evening. I apologize. Oh man. It's been a day. It has. But thank you so much for hanging out with me. And I hope you enjoyed the story this evening. We will continue reading on our next scheduled story stream. So thank you so much for everybody that was here. And I hope you have an awesome evening. And let's go finish off the rest of our week like the awesome people that we are. Have a great evening, you guys. Let's hang out and go say hi to Kim. Give me just a second to get this set up. I see you. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and start this raid, and I will catch you guys over there. So give me just a second.